Hello there, sword friends. This is going to be a very quick review for me because this is not really a full review. This is a Shirasaya JKOO sword, a T10 Shobu Zukuri in Shirasaya with mirror polish. And I'm going to do some quick thoughts on it. And I suppose before I get into it, a couple things that are worth noting. One, I'm admittedly not an expert, and these are just my thoughts, so take them with a grain of salt. Two, these are review samples that are sent to me by JKOO. And when I say these, there's also another katana over here that was sent to me specifically for the intention of review, and the other one is destined for destructive testing. I mentioned these in a video earlier on when I got them in the mail. The point is that they were sent to me as samples. I didn't pay my own money for them, and JKOO is asking me to do this review on these products. This one, however, is destined to go to another reviewer that is not me, and I'm holding up the process by hanging on to it and taking a long time with the review. He's waiting to get this sword in hand. So the reason, one, that I've waited is that I thought that some of the parts might be interchangeable. And if I had the chance to switch out some of the kosher if it survived my testing, that the next reviewer would like it. Now, the Saya seems to fit reasonably well. It doesn't rattle so much or anything, and it's functional. But the Nakago is different on this one, and the ska is not interchangeable. So when I move this over here, it's too small. I imagine it might be able to be hammered in or forced, but I don't want to do that. So as it is, it's not really an effective thing to wait to swap, and I'm going to send this one off. I've done a little bit of cutting with it, a little bit of handling, and I'm prepared to give some general thoughts on it. So one, if I look at the Saya, the Shirasaya on the blade, the basic gist is that it's kind of simple wood unlacquered, and Shirasaya are meant to be storage scabbards, so the fact that it's unlacquered is good. It also is, I think, a good base to start from if you're looking to do a project yourself. It's really basic in and of itself, so I do notice some knots, which maybe aren't coming through on the camera because of brightness issues here. But yeah, in general, ideal Shirasaya, you don't see knots and all that kind of stuff in the wood, and the grain is small. But anyway, you're not going to get that here because it's a really basic and expensive sword. But I think that this Saya and this handle here, this ska base or core, is a functional thing if you're looking for a DIY project and something, at least the woodwork done to start from, so you can begin paint and adding same, gawa, and putting ito on the thing. I think it's a good place to start from that, but for the type of project, but I don't necessarily know. Or if you just like the Shirasaya look, then it gives you something effectively like that. The thing to note is that this is not a functional cutting type mount, so you can use it, but really these two panels are just fit together with glue, and then there's a peg that typically is held in the middle, or two of them, but they're not really holding the sides together. They're kind of keeping the blade from sliding out, so any kind of real impact could cause this to go flying. This one also, you can probably hear, rattles around in there a little bit. And for storage, it's not a problem, but for really use, if I were testing it and I hit, like a rolled wet newspaper or put a lot of impact into it, I'm not confident that this would stay together. So I'm not going to do a lot of cutting with it. And neither should you. That would be my advice. Listen to it if you want, but you're certainly under I'm not trying to limit the ways you want to hurt yourself. That's all I'm saying. So Shirasaya wise, I think it's pretty reasonable. If I move on to the blade, look at the Nakago first. It's pretty well done. It's got some kanji on it that I think are pleasant looking in and of itself, but there's not a lot of detail in the Nakago. A lot of people don't take their sword apart though, even for cleaning. I don't know why, but a lot of people don't, so I can see why a company would not necessarily invest a lot of money in doing it. I like to see it when it's got as much attention as the rest of the blade, but it's hard to blame somebody who's trying to make an inexpensive, affordable sword for saving a little bit of time on the Nakago. As long as it does what it's supposed to do, well, I can see people are most of the time never going to look at it. Why invest time, which equates to more money, in the Nakago? Anyway, it's not terrible. It's just, not exceptional either. The habaki is a brass habaki. It's fit on pretty well, and I'll note that the hamanchi and mumanchi are parallel. A lot of times I see them kind of at weird off angles. This one, they are parallel. The blade itself, or the sharp pointy stabby part, is what JKOO calls a mirror polish. Now this has got my fingerprints on it at the moment, but it is functional. You know, it's serviceably sharp and well polished. This one has been used, but I will note that in the Shirasaya, it rattled around just a little bit, which gave it some kind of scratches right out of the gate. As it ships across the ocean, you know, it's going to bounce around in there a little bit, and so you're going to get some minor blemishes. I'll also note that this mirror polish, the hamon pops out right now in this kind of bright light that's pointing at it, but it doesn't pop out as well in just general sunlight. It starts to kind of look washed out like it does now. As soon as I get it in the right light, though, you can see there's a lot of character in there. It's just not under a really heavy etch, and so it doesn't stand out as well if you don't have it in kind of the right light. Not that that's necessarily a bad thing. The mirror polish is fine. It's very suitable for cutting stuff. If I grab some paper here, the polish is suitable for cutting, and it does a reasonable job cutting paper. I wouldn't call this extremely sharp, but you know, for what it's supposed to be, I'm not good at this. I don't feel any burrs along the edge, but for some reason, it's just not super sharp. That's probably a really irritating sound in the microphone too. Okay. Anyway, you get the general idea. It's serviceably sharp. I don't personally feel any burrs. I've used this sword for cutting already. I don't notice the secondary bevel that I saw in the first JKOO sword that I had. I did a review on one of their tsunami swords, and it had a large secondary bevel. Though in the light you can kind of see there's, you know, like a millimeter or just a really small spot along the edge where it's a little flatter. You know, it's just not super. But I don't notice, basically, I don't see a big secondary bevel. It does not stand out in the way the previous sword did. But it is not as refined an edge as some of the other swords I've had. The other thing, actually, as I'm on the blade, I should point out the Kasaki here, which is probably not coming through super well. One, it's perfectly fine, but this is supposed to be a Shobu Zukuri blade. And a Shobu Zukuri blade, I believe the geometry is just a little bit different. To me, this looks like a shinogi Zukuri blade that doesn't have a Yokote kind of polished on or sanded in, or however you want to call it. It looks just like a shinogi Zukuri profile. When I think of a Shobu Zukuri, it has a different type of profile in my head anyway. The spine of the blade kind of follows all the way to the point, and it really kind of helps you jam through armor, and it comes to a more refined kind of iris leaf type point. Anyway, they're a little different. This looks like a shinogi Zukuri geometry blade with, you know, just without a Yokote in it, and I think it should be a little different than that. Though that's my personal thoughts, and I admittedly am not an expert. If you have some thoughts, maybe I'm off on my history, throw it down in the commentary below. In terms of how this blade handled and performed, I didn't really do any kata or anything with it. Again, I don't want my hand to slip around, and maybe I'm just being a little nervous Nelly about it, but I didn't do any kind of real moving around like I do in some of the other reviews. I whacked it into a couple water bottles, and it did the job just fine. I wouldn't call it the best cutter, though admittedly I wasn't really, my heart wasn't in it, because I know that these can break, and so I'm a little cautious on it. New sword friend James was around for cutting water bottles as well, and he got to take a couple whacks with this sword. James is new to cutting and hadn't swung swords at water bottles and stuff, or really done a lot of cutting prior to whacking stuff in my backyard. So seeing him cut is, I guess, just an example of, you know, how well it does in somebody who's new's hands. Though I don't know that you want to hold that against James, because frankly I'm a little envious of how well he did. He seems to have more self-control and better angles than I do. So anyway, I should probably be taking lessons from him. The end question is, do I think it's worth it? At $187, it's really tough for me to say yes. And not because it's bad, not because it didn't do its job. And admittedly, I'm going to note that I haven't put it through its paces as well as I could have if I put a handle on it or just put more energy into this review. The point is that there's a lot of things that do the job for $187, and I don't see anything particularly special about this one. It's T10, it's differentially hardened, it's pretty in its own right, but it seems like there's some reasonable options out there for $200 that give you something similar. From Huey, if you want a bare blade from them, you can pick up a practical Hanwei, which isn't as well polished, but is a functional sword for $200. I don't know exactly how to quantify this one as worth it, but it's not the sword itself. And if I put this value proposition in a different light and say that it came with this saya and this ska and the fittings on the other sword, it would be $287. And would this sword be worth $287 to me if it had those pieces on it? Yeah, it seems like a much better deal then. This one seems like a lot of work that you're going to have to go through, and the blade is fine, but I don't know that the value inherently rings to me. But if I doll it up and I actually put a finished set of koshai on it and call it $287, I think it's a much more compelling option. So hopefully that helps tell you where my head is at. I don't think the sword is bad. It wasn't terribly impressive in terms of cutting, but again, didn't put it through the paces. And for what it is, it's pretty. Anyway, it's going to go off to the next reviewer, and hopefully you'll get to see their thoughts as well. I'm going to send this sword off, and I hope that what I was able to share was at least helpful and hopefully semi-interesting. That's all I have for you, and as always, cheers, and thanks for watching. Articulating myself here. No, I should probably start. Hey! Like a human, okay?
What?
Like a human. Try not to pick your nose.
I'm not choking you.